Hi, welcome to how to successfully build an offshore team and thriving virtual business. My name's Julie Watson. I'm from Bookkeeping Relief, and we've been operating in business now for 6 or 7 years, and we've been offshoring for about 3 of those years. So what I want to do in today's presentation is just explain to you why we did start offshoring, how we did build a successful offshore team. Basic questions to be answered might be the costs involved. How do you onboard an offshore team member? How do you manage them? We're going to answer questions about whether you need to employ directly or through a BPO and what to consider, how to hire, and basically just try and answer as many questions as I think might come up. I will be here after the presentation, so if you do have any questions, feel free to ask me and I'll be happy to answer them. What I might do is just start with my story. And I do hope that you get a lot out of this. I hope that it really answers your questions. And I also hope that it helps you to grow your business. So the question is, why embark on building an offshore team? Basically, the reason I started an offshore team is out of necessity. So we're here in Australia, and at the time there were 2 or 3 of us from Australia on the team, and I really needed another team member. So we were growing. We had placed some ads. I'd placed several ads in Seek. I had employed a couple of contractors or employees that hadn't worked out. And at the time, I had an ad going for about 3 or 4 months. The applicants just were either not good enough, not qualified enough, maybe had the wrong work ethic, or just couldn't handle the type of work that we were doing. So even though my name, the business is Bookkeeping Relief, we do a lot of accounting. So we don't describe ourselves as bookkeepers, but rather as BAS accountants. With so much of what we do is accounting, even though we're not doing tax returns. It's just getting more and more complex here in Australia. So it's very important that you do find the right team members. I was quite frustrated and went to a team building exercise and just ran into somebody who is offshoring. And she answered some of my questions and I embarked upon it. And I spoke to a company called Toa Global, which we ended up working through. Got an account manager and just asked all of my questions to them. I started with my first employee with Toa Global because I just couldn't find workers in Australia. And the process was really good because I was quite green to the situation. I didn't know anything about dealing with somebody from another country. And I was a bit nervous about the whole process. So Toa Global was a really great place to start. And they helped me with the hiring process with all the information that I needed. And I put on my first employee, which took about 3 months between the time that I signed up to the time that I started. She was amazing. And then after a year of working with my first one, I decided to put on a second employee in the Philippines through Toa Global. So I had 2 going and then lost one. So during COVID, there was work from home orders and it was very difficult. She decided that she couldn't go back to the office and lost one of my team members. Then eventually I picked up another team member directly. So I do have one with Toa and I have one that's direct at the moment. That's my story. What I might do, I will go on to tell you that I'm so grateful that I did it. I'm really glad that I did it. In fact, I don't think my business would have kept going if I hadn't gone to offshoring. There just was no talent. I have tried to hire in Australia since employing in the Philippines and I'm still finding the same problems. So to me, it really solved a crucial problem, but it's also been a really great experience. So I'll go on and explain to you what the ins and outs of it all, but it's really is a great option for your business. Some of the benefits of offshoring I found were you have a greater choice of candidate. So when I was here in Australia, I really wanted someone in the office so I could teach them the way we did it. Therefore, we had a really small group of candidates who were prepared to come to the office and who were living in the local area. So we just had a really small candidate base. On top of that, I do think that I had probably some notions of the sort of employee that I wanted. And that all got opened up when I decided to do offshoring. You get a greater chance, a choice of candidates for employment. So that was a really great thing. You also find that there is a different work ethic and cultural dynamic when you put somebody on from the Philippines. We use the Philippines, so that's why I'll predominantly talk about them. But there are people I know that employ from India, um, and they've been working out really well as well. The Philippines is a fantastic country. They've got a fantastic work ethic. They're just amazing. So I'm really glad we went to the Philippines. Their work ethic is different to ours. Their family ethic is different. Their culture is so family oriented. They have a lot of respect for elders and respect for people with experience. So when you teach them something, they have the attitude that you know more than me and I need to learn from you. And it's a really great attitude to have. It's perfect when you need someone and you to train them and you want them to listen to what you're saying. They have a really lovely work ethic. That's a benefit. Um, and it's quite cost effective. I do believe that when you tell somebody you're offshoring, initially they think you're doing it for the cost. And if that is your primary focus, you may not succeed in offshoring. Yes, it is cost effective, but we'll talk about later what the real costs are. It's really not as cost effective as it looks. So yes, it is. It's cheaper to hire somebody overseas, but there are other issues and other things that you need to consider. So that is definitely a benefit, but it should never be the primary driver in offshoring. Some of the disadvantages to offshoring that we have found are additional training is always required. So you may have somebody who's really well trained accountant, for example, that knows what they're doing in the back, but you need to teach them in Australian law or your country's laws and your country's GST or VAT laws. So you do have to provide additional training. There's also cultural training that you'll need to provide so they can interact with people from your culture. So there is quite a lot of additional training, but I do realize that when you do hire someone in your own country, there is also additional training. So you can't just bring someone in off the street and go, okay, off you go to work. So you do have additional training anyway. The other disadvantage of offshoring is quite obvious that clients often have a preconceived idea about working with people from other countries. So they may have had some bad experiences dealing with someone from India on the phone in call centers. And they generally tend to believe that the work output would be lower if you outsource. And a lot of locals believe the same thing. A lot of people in the industry believe it. And I just believe it's a myth. If you train someone correctly, you're the right person. It doesn't matter what country they live in. But it is a preconceived idea that you do have to deal with and factor in. Another disadvantage, of course, is cultural differences. So these people that you are employing overseas are coming from a different language background. So English would be their second language most of the time. Their written English may not be as good, but also the way that they talk to people might be different and there are things that they expect from people. So you have cultural differences and you also need to learn about them and consider them. One question I often get asked is it better to employ directly or use a BPO? It's a really good question because a BPO will sit between you and your team member. So what they do is they reside in the country that you're employing in, and they generally have a really great office situation like the photo that you can see here. They will provide the computers, they'll provide the workstations, the staff amenities, the security. They'll provide a whole bunch of things that you would normally provide in your local office. And they do that on your behalf. Then they invoice you for the cost of those. So the BPO is a really nice, secure place for employees to come and work. The other thing they do is they obviously do the hiring process, they do the vetting, the background checks in their own country. They will contact references for you. And the other thing they will do is provide HR support. So we're with Toa Global and they provide HR support for us. If we have an issue with one of our team members, instead of actually ringing them up or speaking on Zoom and saying, is everything okay? Are you okay? Sometimes they don't want to talk to the boss about something important that they might be going through. They're worried they could lose their job. There's an intermediary at Toa Global that will do that. So somebody who's Filipino who will then sit them down and talk to them and communicate something that you might be having trouble communicating. That's a really great thing. They have team building days that we're not able to do here. Social days, they get to hang out with friends and meet friends there. So it's great. When their computer breaks down, there's a tech guy. When they have a headache, there's a nurse. Really great service. And it's really good to go through a BPO if you've never offshored before. I think that part of the fear of offshore, the reason people don't offshore is it really is so much unknown, and they don't know, what if they put somebody on and it doesn't work out, and what if they get the wrong person, and what if that person steals money, and all these questions you have. A BPO protects you from all of that. They usually have a built-in retention period. So if your employee doesn't work out, you get another one. They have great security protocols, and they check and make sure everything's great. The other thing about a BPO is when they're working in the BPO, they have to drop their mobile phone, and they can't bring that in. And they also are not allowed to take anything out of the office. So it's really highly secure. Do you employ directly? So employing directly has other benefits, of course. You don't pay the management fees of a BPO, so it's a lot more cost effective. You have more flexibility around what your employee can and cannot do. For example, some BPOs require the employee works at the center and can't work from home. So you might have that issue. You employing directly is certainly gives you a lot more flexibility. So it's up to you and your risk appetite and how you're feeling about it. But if you're brand new, I do recommend going through a BPO. When it comes to the hiring process, what you want to do is, whether you're going through BPO or you're doing it directly, you want to have a list of requirements. So write down what you require from this team member. And it's a little bit like employing locally. You would probably want the same kind of things. So list your requirements. You don't have to dumb it down. For example, you don't have to go, well, I'm not going to get that because they're overseas. Yes, you will. As I said, we're BAS accountants here. We had a choice of employing a qualified bookkeeper in the Philippines, or a qualified accountant. And we decided to hire an accountant. And I think that's the best option. I don't recommend hiring a bookkeeper there because their level of bookkeeping is a lot lower than here, and their level of education for a bookkeeper is lower. We hired CPA accountants, and they were fantastic, able to do the work. There are manual journals involved in what we do. There are loan agreements involved, things like a lot of complex reconciliations. So list your requirements. What are you looking for? What sort of personality do you want? What sort of job will you be giving them? So make sure you have all that information. Then if you send that to the BPO, they will look for the candidates and they will give you a short list. They'll give you maybe 6 or 7, depending on how many respond. And you then can shortlist. But either way, you do it directly or through the BPO. Shortlist your candidates and you run an interview over Zoom, which is just exactly like your interviews here. You can ask questions, like you can grab the interview questions off the PB guide, the PB training for HR, and you can also add a few of your own. So what we did was we grabbed some of those questions, and we also asked the question, why do you want to work for an Australian business? We wanted to know why they specifically wanted to work for an Australian company. What do you know about our company? And surprisingly, they have all done their research, which is really good. You want to know, did they do their research? What do they know about you? Tells you a lot about the kind of person that they are. We ask them, what is important to you in life? We want to know what's really important to them. And that tells you a lot about someone. It's really good at the interview stage to really pay attention to their English, their accent, and then also, if you can, get them to write to you a paragraph about themselves. You understand what their written English level is like. With TOA, they do the written and verbal English tests for you and give you all the test results, and they do academic tests as well. But if you're doing it directly, I would recommend you really consider the English accent, their written and spoken English, because you may or may not decide now whether you want to put them on client-facing work. But if down the track you need to put them on client-facing work, that will be a real issue. Then have a consider what employment law is in that country. So TOA will help you, or a BPO will help you with all of this. They'll tell you about the 13th month salary, about public holidays, and the notice period. So that should say 13th month. I'm sorry, that's an extra month payable to employees in the Philippines in December. There's a certain notice period. It's a lot longer than in Australia. So you need to understand if you're putting somebody on, they generally have a job at the time when you're looking. And then they may have to give, say, 60 days, 90 days notice, 30 days notice, whatever the notice period is there, you've got to be mindful of that. They have a lot more public holidays too. They have about double what we have here in Australia. So there will be a lot of days that they're not there. I think they have about 13 something. It's a lot, about one a month. That's the hiring process. Once you've hired them, you've gone and said, yep, I want that particular employee, then you want to be very prepared for when they start. It's really crucial to the success of building an offshore team that you are prepared. If you come into it thinking, I'll fly by the seat of my pants, I'm so busy, I can't really do a training plan for them, or, you know what, I'll just train them as we go, you'll find that will be very, it'll be quite anxious for the employee, but it'll also really cause issues for you. So I do know business owners that have done that and they haven't really been very well prepared. And they said that it was a big issue. It caused a lot of problems for months because their employee didn't progress. It was quite confusing. So what I say you should do is write a training plan. And you should really do this for every employee, whether they're local or overseas. Write down a training plan of what you want to train and the order. Get all of your passwords right, get all the access right before they start. And generally, and the other thing is get your technology right before they start. One thing that we used is a thing called Practice Protect. And I highly recommend Practice Protect because what they do is they provide a login portal for all your software for your overseas team and your local team. So what you do is rather than log into all the different apps that you have, use your accounting software, your project management software, timesheeting software, Dropbox, everything, you just have one login and that's secured for them. And then once they log into that, they click on all the little icons and they'll all log in when they need them. And you can log in and out. So the good thing is if you do finish with that team member, you don't have to remember which login they have, log them in and out. So Practice Protect is great. It's a massive time saver as well. Get your training recorded, I would recommend. Yes, you can do training online. That's really good if they can go back and look over what they've done. But if you can record something, so rather than saying, I'll just do a Zoom video and I'll show them how to do it, record your Zoom video. Because Filipinos love going back and watching things again. And they will do that. They'll go back and watch it again. They'll play it slowly. They'll take notes. They're really thorough and they love videos. So definitely get some videos, get some YouTube links and give them a whole stream of videos to watch and they'll plow through those and you'll find they'll actually get a lot more out of that so they can replay it. So have your systems in place, have timesheeting app ready, have your job costing ready, get your video to train them in how to do it. And I do recommend you get them on timesheeting and you definitely manage job costing. When I say job costing, it's more like, time management across the clients. Because when you have an offshore team member or a virtual team of any sort, wherever they are, one of the things that makes it a challenge is managing people's time. They're not in the office. You can't see what they're doing. You don't know if they're on Slack, Skype, or on Facebook all day. the only way you can manage it is to really look at the hours they're putting in and recording against clients. And then if you were to find that they're spending too long on a particular client, because you have the data, you can then go back and you can talk to them about why it took 5 hours to do something that should only take a minute. You'll find there's a training opportunity there. So I do recommend getting a really good project management sort of process management system there where you can manage their time against jobs, against clients, and have some great reports so that together you can present to your team the efficiencies and where the inefficiencies are. I would say, finally, an important thing about onboarding is to be patient. What I found is the two Filipinos that we had in the team really took a long time to get started. So if I put an Australian on, I would give them about 6 months to be fully independent and able to work without me. I would say you're probably looking at slightly longer, maybe 6 months, but maybe more like 10 months with the Filipinos. So by the time you get to 6, 7, 8 months, they're really getting the hang of it. But in the meantime, there will be quite a few mistakes, a long time wasted, and be prepared for that. Be very patient. You need to try and set up systems so that you don't give up too soon. I do remember with my first team member going to her about 2 months in thinking, she's not going to work out. She can't get this, making mistakes still, the same mistakes still. Had to go back to the HR and talk to her about it. Well, she ended up being amazing. So just try and be patient with them. Another thing you need to consider is performance management. Again, I suppose I hope you're getting the gist that creating a successful offshore team and successful virtual team requires good systems, good background systems. If you don't have good systems, it's going to be very haphazard and could prone to fail. So have great systems, have stuff ready. I recommend you have a daily meeting. We have a daily meeting every day at 10:30. We get on Zoom and we have a Zoom meeting, and it can go for a half an hour to sometimes an hour and a half, depending on what we're going through. We do it with the whole team. So at the moment, there's 3 of us, and every day we have a bit of a chit chat in the beginning. Then I'll go to each team member and say, do you have any questions or comments? And generally what they'll do is they'll write down questions or issues that they have over client work throughout the day and know that they're going to have a meeting the next day and bring it to the meeting. And it's really good because a question one team member will have, somebody else can learn from. Everybody needs to be paying attention because everyone's learning. So daily meetings are really, really good. It also keeps people engaged. I'd say also have regular goals and reviews. So in the first 12 months, it's a really good idea to have quarterly reviews and quarterly goal setting because there is just so much learning that is done. We had CPAs that knew so much about, they already knew the accounting. I didn't have to teach them about the accounting, but they had a lot of learning. They had to learn our systems, how we do things, our processes, learning text, all sorts of things. So we did quarterly meetings and goal setting and then reviewed those goals, which was really good. After that 12 months, we went to annual performance reviews because generally after 12 months, they're pretty independent, pretty self-sufficient. And then you've got these annual goals, annual reviews. Certainly you can continue with quarterly and definitely tie in your annual performance review with your annual salary review. The annual or quarterly performance review is a really good opportunity for them to self-assess and to tell you what it is that they're concerned about. Sometimes they will not tell you on a day-to-day basis. So really build into your meetings one-on-one time, one-on-one opportunities where you can say, hey, tell me how things are really going. I notice you could be struggling in this area. Is there anything I can help you with there? If you're very specific with your questions and you take them out on their own, you're more likely to get an answer. When you have the training, the group meeting, the morning meeting, and you say, how are you going? Are you okay with your workload? They'll always say yes. They tend not to want to talk about it in front of other people. But then later on, you might go back to them and say, well, you know, I feel like your workload could be a little much. Would you like me to take over this job for you? And suddenly you'll get, oh, thank you so much. Oh, so overwhelmed. I didn't know what I was doing. And you're like, well, why didn't you say something? I keep telling you to say something. And then they're like, oh, I didn't want to say something. So you have to sort of really think about their culture, the way that they communicate, try and communicate the way they're expecting you to or what they need you to ask. Yeah. So definitely good to take them away and ask how things going. Definitely ask rather than how things going, how you feeling. Make it very point questions, For example, are you finding this job easily? Finding this particular task easy to do? Are you struggling here? How is your time management? Sometimes it's just a basic time management thing that they need help with. And you might be quite surprised when you come down and ask them specifically about each thing. They usually will tell you when they feel safe to do that. But you need to sometimes ask a lot of questions to get that out of them. Whereas I find here in Australia in the West, people would just be very forthcoming with problems. They'll usually tell you straight away. I find in the Philippines, they don't want to upset anybody. So you do sometimes have to ask a little more. Client facing or back office is another really good. I really like this topic because I find that with TOA Global, a lot of the people I know that are offshoring tend to put their team members in the back office. So they hire them for the back office work, for the process work, for the stuff that doesn't deal with clients. And that's really good. And you may need that. So there's nothing wrong with doing that. But don't forget that these people really can deal with clients as well, and they can be so great at it. So they're also really, like in the West, you would hire somebody, say, as a BAS accountant or a tax accountant, and that's really all that they're prepared to do. When you take on a Filipino team member, you can ask them to do other things. They're really great at admin, so you can give them some of the admin that you have to do. And they're great at that. And the other thing I found is when I was quiet and things were a little bit quiet, I had like some presentations to do and I'm really terrible with creative stuff. So I handed one of my team member this PowerPoint presentation and said, is there anything you can do with it? And goodness, she came back with a great presentation. She was fantastic with graphics. She loved it. She loved the challenge. She loved that I handed her something and trusted her with it. Did great with Excel. You just think about things that you're not that great at and ask your team member if they're okay with that. You might find that they're happy to take it on and then do such a great job at it. So don't just stick with what you've hired them for. They're very capable of extra things. I think that one of the things I've certainly experienced is they rise to the bar that you give them. So start off with really high expectations and tell them this is the expectation. This is where you want them to lead. This is where you want them to go. And this is the sort of work that you want them to do. And they will get there. If your expectation, your bar is low, you will not be able to expect them to do much more. None of them came to me and said, hey, I'm great with graphics. They didn't come to me and say, hey, I'm really good with admin. I just had to sort of throw it at them and go, wow, you're really great at this. So do you put them on client facing or back office? Look, I prefer client facing actually. I had no choice because I was just myself and then the two team members from the Philippines. So I would say make that decision about what you really need. Don't look at what you think they're capable of. It's what you need first. And then ask them to fill that gap for you. So some of the pros and cons, definitely, if you're looking at putting them on client facing work, you've definitely got some cons there. You've got the issue of your client's perception of dealing with someone overseas. And you've got the issue potentially with them being willing to pick up the phone and communicate or even being nervous about communicating with Australian clients. So you've got those things. definitely one of the pros is that they can be just so lovely and so great. Just a couple of stories that we've had. So both my team members are now client facing, and it didn't happen straight away. It took nearly a year, before I would put them on. So one of them was with me for about a year, and then she left, and then my other one now has been with me for 2 years, and then this one that I've got who I employ directly has been working with somebody else, so has a lot of experience with Australian business as well. So it would have probably taken about a year before I felt like they were ready, and then put them on clients and started off slowly. So basically what I did was I would put them on a client, and then when I felt they're ready, and then I would email the client and say, hey, you've got a new bookkeeper. I'm now dealing with Kate, and Kate's great. She's been with me for this many months or years. She's a CPA, she's very qualified. I'm still going to be here. I'm still here to check every BAS. I'm here to check everything that she does, and you can always speak to me. But Kate's going to deal with your bookkeeping. I didn't mention they were in the Philippines, so I would let Kate and the client talk and negotiate it, usually by email because it's all virtual anyway. And then check in every now and then, check in with the client. How's it all going? Check in with Kate. How's it going? Be monitoring things, fixing up any little issues as they arise. And then after about 3 or 4 months, I would then ring the client and I would say, hi, how's it going with Kate? Have you got any issues? And they would be like, no, she's fantastic. And then I would say, well, do you know she works in the Philippines? And at that point, they would then, what? Really? She's so good. And I would answer their questions and say, yes, she works 100% for me. Doesn't work for anyone else. Yes, she's in the Philippines, but she works directly for me. And generally, everyone's been fantastic about it. I think because they'd already dealt with the team member for starters for a few months and found they're really good already. I haven't had a single client say, I don't want her, but I've also put in my email that if you did ever want to go back to me, you can. No one has. It's really, really good. It's been great, actually. And I get so much positive feedback. I can honestly, maybe once a week, I get somebody telling me, I love dealing with this team member. I love her. She's so great. She's so professional. She knows all the answers. Well, they don't know all the answers, but at the daily meeting, they get the answers to the questions they don't know, but the client doesn't know that. Just yesterday, I've had a client ring me and say, oh, I just love Kate. I ask her all my silly questions and she doesn't make me feel silly. She answers, she's so polite, she's so nice, and she gets everything done so fast. She's so efficient. She gets back to me. They love them. I had a client once, was working with one of my team members, and he rang me up about something. And I said, oh, by the way, did you know that Melissa works for me in the Philippines? And he's like, what? She's so good. Are you kidding? He was so impressed that he went to TOA and hired an employee because he dealt with such a great employee through our business. So don't be afraid to put them on client-facing work. I got them a Zoom phone number. So they've all got a local Zoom phone number. And if you introduce it slowly and you don't have a bad perception yourself, so if you've got a very positive attitude to it, your clients will pick up on that positive attitude and your team members will feel valued. I really do believe that putting team members from overseas on client-facing work is a privilege that not a lot of them have. It's something they just love, to have the responsibility that they can deal with clients and that you trust them to deal with clients. And it just makes their work so much more interesting. I feel like you would retain them better by putting them on client-facing work. I know at TOA, back when Melissa was there and Melissa and Kate were working there, because now everybody's working from home with COVID, and they said they had the reputation of being the specialists. The other team members would come to them if they had a question, because these two were the specialists, and they were only that because they were working on total client work. They were doing so many different things and had to learn so many different laws and applications that other team members would come to them with questions. So It's certainly something I highly recommend. Utilize your team members much more than what you would expect, and you'll be very happy with the results. You do need to look at your engagement letter, make sure that you haven't got any stipulation in your engagement letter that they are only in Australia, for example, and monitor the results. So definitely check in with your team, check in with your clients. Don't just hand them over and drop the ball, of course, because that's when issues can arise. It's very important that you are very, checking in with your team member about your client as well, because we have had a couple of instances where clients have taken it upon themselves to be abusive with the team member. So they're frustrated because of something or other, and then ring up Kate in the Philippines and just start yelling at certain things and swearing, not at her really, but just getting really angry. And I've had to speak to her about it and saying, look, how is this person's attitude towards you? Oh, no, it's all right. Just gets a bit emotional. What does that look like? And then she would tell me, and I'd ring the client and say, listen, you don't understand, but Kate works in a culture where swearing is bleeped out of every TV show. She doesn't hear swearing anywhere in the Philippines. And or do you realize you really got a bit emotional with her on the phone and she got a bit emotional? So definitely check in. Don't allow them to speak badly to your team member. You wouldn't allow it with your local team either. And give feedback. So when you get positive feedback, give it back in the team environment. Do it all in the team Zoom meeting. Don't do it privately so that everyone knows that they've had a really good review. And that's really all that I have here. I hope I've covered a lot of your questions, but please do ask me if there's anything that you've wanted to know that I haven't covered. Certainly, if you do want to outsource to another country, there are different cultural norms to worry about, different things to think about, but nothing should stop you from building an offshore team. I don't think anymore that we really have the luxury of saying, hey, let's keep the jobs in Australia. Let's keep the jobs in America. Yes, it's a really great thing, but if you can't find the workers, then there are workers in another country, and it's not a step backwards. It's actually a step forwards. For me and for my business, it's been very, very successful, and we have a great small team and the clients are very happy. So for me, it was something I did out of necessity, but I'm really glad that I did it. Good luck.